So there has unfortunately been a master who several years ago was doing something heroic, had been healing other patients, and then somebody came in and was trying to heal them, and they began to die. And then he extended his energy even more to try to stop them from dying. But that was too much on his system, and he ended up having a heart attack and he died. So we lost a master because he gave his all to somebody else to try to stop them from dying. So it is serious. It's not just a theoretical model of energy. It is something that is actually part of your life force that you're collecting and gathering and then you're using.
Welcome. I'm here with Jeff Hardee. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, Sean, thank you. Nice to be on here.
I appreciate you coming on and I apologize in advance because I'm about to ask you a lot of ignorant questions. So please be gentle. You seem like a gentle soul, but you don't have to hold back if you get too many questions that are not grounded. But
right.
That's the reason I'm having you on, so that I can not only educate myself, but educate my audience about what Qi Gong is and why it's important. And then in the episode after this, we'll delve a little bit deeper on its intersection with other things related to the phenomena. So with that, before we get started there, just can you tell folks very briefly about your background, who you are, where you're coming from?
Yeah. So pretty briefly, I am a consciousness researcher and practitioner. I have a bachelor's degree in religious studies where I focused on mysticism and new religious movements. That's through Arizona State University. And then had some difficulties in getting into graduate school, actually, with that subject. It was a little too early for some of the academics I wanted to work with for me to be in that area. So I had to take a career in IT for a bit. And then I stumbled across this program at Ubiquity University in their School of Science and Consciousness in Extraterrestrial Studies, which allowed me to merge a lot of subjects together because I like these broad interdisciplinary subjects. And in that program, it's a combined master's PhD program. I'm actually working in my dissertation on a participant observation study of 3 Nei Gong groups. They're Western groups that practice this Taoist inner alchemy. And they're Western teachers who have learned from Easterners, but are now teaching Westerners. So they've crossed that cultural divide. And I'm looking at various aspects of that from a religious studies perspective. I'm looking also from a technological perspective, because I see this Nei Gong as a technology of our human body or human consciousness, and how that moves from culture as it moves along. And then looking at potential applications of this, like, for example, how can that improve your natural psi abilities, or could you use it in order to contact NHIs and have direct communication with them? So it's a rich subject with lots of things that you can dig into. I'm not just looking, purely theoretically. I'm definitely doing kind of in the weeds style of learning. It's called phenomenology. It's an approach in anthropology where I actually am practicing the things and getting my own observations, as well as trying to bring in scientific equipment in order to measure some of the phenomenon so that we can merge that left brain, right brain kind of analysis.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
All right. Now, the obvious question is, what is Qi Gong?
Yeah. I guess I'll even go one step back on you and ask, what is Qi, right? Because we can't assume that everybody is into these subjects or they're aware of these things. So it's a really big subject. You write an entire book on just the concept of Qi, but the way that I'm using it is I'm looking at essentially the energy that is utilized by a human being, not just to live, not just for their cellular function and things like that, but the Taoist inner alchemy process is a process by which you refine the Qi that you take in through your life. And you start with a base Qi, which all sort of go, in the sequence of the process. When you're born with a Qi called Jing. You're born with a type of energy, and the Taoists call it Jing. It's a base level of energy that you need to survive, right, in order to continue on with your life. Well, if you don't do anything with that Jing, it's just going to slowly degrade over time as you grow, and then your Jing will deplete, and then eventually you'll die. But there is a way in which you can take in the energy of food or air or even certain things you consume, like the environment you're in or the things you consume mentally or intellectually or things like that. You can take in that energy and you can actually apply that to replenish your Jing so that it doesn't deplete as much, which allows you to live longer. But then you can continue going and you can refine the energy you bring in, and that could be considered to be refined Qi. Or I recently was watching a video from Daniel Mitchell where he talks about practice Qi, the Qi that you actually get from practice. So it's not just, Qi is a very generic term, it's just energy. The ideogram in Chinese is really just the steam coming off of rice. So we're not just talking in general of Qi, I'm talking about a refined Qi that you get as part of the alchemical process. And as you continue to refine it, you get more than what you need for your life. And that with that more, you can actually use it to move that Qi around in your body, enhance your abilities. You can actually use it for healing. And if you keep refining it even more, you can actually express that Qi out of your hands or your fingers to heal others. You can use it for, doing really well in martial arts and defending yourself, or for spiritual advancement. Spiritual advancement is you keep refining this Qi. So from Jing, it moves to Qi, and then it transforms again into something called Shen. And that Shen is what really unlocks a lot of these abilities and allows you to have this kind of communication, it is said, with things like ghosts, ancestors, nature spirits, gods and goddesses. And so my question is, well, if that's the case, and that's a real experience people are having, why not also with NHIs, non-human intelligences, if it's the fact that these beings from other dimensions or other planets are visiting us and they use telepathy, or can we not then communicate with them? So Qi in general is thought of as just energy, right? But the way that I'm using it is a type of refined energy that you use. It's a process. There's various practices that you do on top of making sure your health is good, right? Eating well, exercising well, being in a good environment, that you refine and then you utilize for a certain purpose. So the practices that help cultivate this Qi, there are several, but in general, in the Eastern arts, you're talking about Qi Gong, Nei Gong, and Nei Dan. So Qi Gong is more of like the generic, health-based Tai Chi kind of practices, just moving the body, stretching, getting familiar with just the fact that you're improving your health and allowing some of the energy to flow through your body. It's just the very beginning levels of utilizing that Qi, that life essence. Nei Gong is more of the beginnings of Taoist internal alchemy, where you're actually trying to accumulate the Qi. So you're doing something which is called forming your Danchen. There are 3 centers in the human body. So below the belly button, a couple inches below, and then inside the body, there's a center, which is called the lower Danchen. That has to be formed.
Is this equivalent to like a chakra, sort of?
That's debatable. There are some equivalents, some people say, but then the way which the chakras are laid out on the Indian side is slightly different, slightly separately aligned. The concept in Taoism is that this would be closer to the lower 1, 2, or 3 of the chakras, if you think about it that way.
Okay.
But it actually is a center you can feel. And the idea is that once you are able to form it, you have to actually do some exercises to get it to form. It becomes a container that then you put Qi into, so then that Qi doesn't leak out. And then once that container is formed, then it begins to pressurize. And then when it pressurizes, you can start adding more, and it becomes more like a cauldron. It becomes like a pressure cooker that then starts transforming this Qi. So the Nei Gong process, you could say, is the beginnings of the formation of this cauldron. The Nei Dan process is one step deeper in the alchemy process. Some people say that is the true name for the alchemy proper, because that's when you're transforming this Qi you have a healthy body, Qi Gong, you're able just to move your limbs and can stretch and all that kind of stuff. And then you form the lower danchin, that's the Nei Dan, that's the Nei Gong, inner practice. Nei Gong, Nei is inner, Gong is like a type of practice or, successive practice. Nei Dan is when you're transforming the things that are in your lower danchin and actually doing the alchemical process of, changing, as, the Western world, changing base metals into gold. You're kind of changing it inside your body. You are the alembic itself. You're changing that energy, and then it actually becomes more refined, more refined, more refined. And so as you move it around in your body with your Qi Gong, with your Nei Dan inner practices, then you're able to use it for whatever other purposes. So Qi is a very broad subject. It's just energy. But what I'm speaking about is something that is an actual substance. And I'm speaking from experience. It's an actual substance that you are creating in your body, you're collecting in your body, and then you can actually have it move, and you can feel it moving in your body. And as you do so, as you continue to do the practices, your body starts changing, literally changing. It is a transformation of your biology into something that is able to do things like Fa Qi, which is to do this human external electric emission.
And how long have you been doing this?
So I've been doing things like martial arts and yoga for many years prior, but eventually I came into formal study under a teacher for this. And technically, I reached out to my first teacher, who is Rudy from Authentic Nei Gong, and I reached out to him, I believe it was December of 2022, and it was in 2023 in February that I first did his first seminar. So technically, according to his program, his Authentic Nei Gong program, I've been doing that since February 2023. And then as I've been doing that, and that's every day, meditation, a couple hours a day, there's both sitting, standing, and moving practices. I also started training under an adjacent group, which is Nei Kung Fu from Italy. And then just to round out the trifecta, I started studying under Lotus Nei Gong. Daniel Mitchell is the teacher who runs that. But what's interesting is that the first two groups, the Authentic Nei Gong and the Nei Kung Fu, their main Eastern teacher is the same. That's Master Zhou Ganshen. He's a Taoist priest. He's been studying Taoist inner alchemy since he was a boy. And he's really one of the most powerful Fa Qi practitioners that I know of, who can emit Qi out of his body. You can feel it viscerally, and I'm in the process of trying to measure it scientifically.
When you're thinking about that problem, when the energy comes out, does it possess an electric field or a magnetic field, or is it both? Like, when you think about processes to measure it?
Yeah. So it feels like both. So I'll give you.
Okay, so it's like voltage or current. Like if it's current, just right. By the way, by training, I have a degree in electrical engineering. So
yeah, awesome.
It's just right hand rule, right? So if you have a current going this way, you're going to have a magnetic field fluxing perpendicular to that. Just right hand rule. So
exactly.
Okay. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry. Yeah.
No, I think that's a perfect analogy, because that's how I'm going to be starting to try to measure this. I think every time I say this to my teachers and I say, hey, I want to measure this, they get exasperated with me because they want me just to do my exercises as if I don't believe that it actually is occurring. I know that it occurs. I've had the experience myself. I've seen other people have the experience. There's lots of videos. I know it's a fact, but it's important, I think, for other reasons, especially in my mind, for helping to introduce the Western world to meridian theory and Qi and whatnot, to help improve our medical system itself. It can actually heal other people in a way that is significant, and it needs to be part of our practice. That's one of the reasons why I want to measure it. So I'll give you two experiences. So as a practitioner, one of the things that I've experienced over time, it's not something that will happen instantly. This is an actual transformation of the physical body, and it takes time to do that. Just like it takes time to somebody to drop weight. If you do it too fast, it's not really going to last. It's not going to be healthy, and you're going to get lots of loose skin and things like that. The same thing, I'm trying to transform my body to open up my channels, meridian channels, to be able to allow this Qi to flow better. After some time, of one of the sitting practices, one of the sitting meditation practices, I get to the point now where when I'm focusing my consciousness down at the lower dantian area, I feel as if there is a balloon that is blowing up in my lower abdomen. It's not something I'm doing. I'm not contracting my muscles or anything. I'm simply placing my mind down there, and I feel this balloon blowing up. It feels very much like a magnetic field is establishing. Once that happens, it has now progressed for me to the point, it used to just be slowly blowing up, especially as on the inhale, as I'm breathing, my abdomen will expand. So there is that. The muscles do expand. But then after that, like maybe a second or so after that, this thing inside me will blow up, which to me feels like the magnetic field. I think more and more it's a magnetic field because now that I have more reps of doing that, where it gets super strong, almost to the point where I'm a little concerned, it feels like something's going to tear, that it gets to a certain point where it begins to grip. So the magnetic field builds and builds and builds and grows, and then it starts to grip and contract on itself. And to me, I've looked it up. My hypothesis is that's the Lorentz force. So if you look up what the Lorentz force is, that's exactly what should happen when a magnetic field gets to a certain state and there's a current going through, it begins to contract and actually create more like a ball. So there's that experience that I have that is a magnetic field, and then it feels like a current is starting, and then it contracts, and therefore it seems to reinforce that idea. And I do feel electricity in that area when that happens. Now, going back to an experience that I've had from receiving the Fa Chi from Master Joe, when he pushes the Chi, he pushes it through his arm, out his fingers. So his fingers are not touching mine, and I can feel what I call liquid electricity flowing from his fingers into my fingertips, and it flows through my finger, through the center of my finger, down through my arm, and based on how open my meridians are is how far it will go. Now,
just stop you real quick. Can you define what you keep using the word meridian? Can you define that for folks who don't know?
Sure. So it's debatable on what that is. It's part of Chinese medicine. But my understanding is a meridian is a channel which runs along the body at certain places. And you can look up meridian theory and you'll see the classic, there's a line in the front, there's a line in the back, there's lines down the arm, and each of those channels are related to a certain internal organ, liver, spleen, stomach, that kind of stuff. And then when you do acupuncture, it will positively affect the flow of the energy through into the organ. A lot of people make the mistake and they think the channel is like a vein or an artery, like it's an actual tube where something is flowing through. It's not that. Instead, it is the spaces of the folds of your fascia or your tendons or something. It's the spaces between those that then you can open and make through exercise, through certain exercises and whatnot. You can actually allow those spaces to be more cleanly, have clean lines. So when you start sending the energy through, it can flow through faster. So when he sends the electricity through into my body, then I can feel it travel through those spaces. Now, if we had some kind of I don't think an X-ray would do it. I strongly think a millimeter wave scanner will see this because of what I've run into in airports and what I've heard from other people. If I do strong meditation on my lower dantian just before I walk through an airport security where they use a millimeter wave scanner, I get flagged. And when I look at the panel of what I get flagged for, they show a mass at my abdomen, my lower abdomen. And they ask me, have you had surgery? And they're checking to see if I have like a belt on or, if I have some kind of weapon or something like that. And it's not. It's because I've done that meditation just before I go through airport security. So I want to confirm that. I've talked to some other people. They have some similar experiences, but I want to test this, right? So I'm going to try the next couple of flights I do. I'll try some flights where I don't do any meditation at all and see if I get flagged. And some, if I do strong meditation beforehand, if I do get flagged, and that'll give me some kind of experimental proof that the millimeter wave scanner is useful for measuring.
Oh, by the way, you just gave like NSA and the Department of Homeland Security something to search for. Because I bet you they're like, yeah, like how many Qi Gong, or I guess in this case, Nei Dan practitioners are there, and they just have to look for. They'd have to look for this millimeter wave scanner across all airports in the U.S. with, triggers at the abdomen level, right?
Yeah, but hey, I've been looking, and I have found a portable millimeter wave scanner I could buy from China. Surprisingly, it's several $1,000s.
Yeah, you better get it soon, because it might be several more $1,000s.
That's right.
Yeah.
But as an independent researcher, it's hard to get this equipment, so it's easier just to go through airport security. But eventually, I would like to get a portable millimeter wave in order to prove this theory. Yes or no? Is this the case? But there's a really good book. I can't think of the name right now, but it presents the theory really well, that if you look at the formation of a fetus, a human fetus, as it's growing from one cell to multiple cells, there's a lot of folding that happens for that biological being as it starts to grow out and then differentiate into different organs and parts, arms, legs, head, that kind of stuff. And the thesis in this book is that those folds become the standard TCM meridian channels. That it's the spaces between the large folds that are between the parts of the body that go into organs that become these meridians. And by doing certain physical exercises, Nei Dan is very physical. You are helping to sort of clean those lines and make them lined up more. There's a practice called the Yi Zhen Jing, which is literally the tendon or sinew changing process, where you're actually doing forceful movements to stretch and to open your tendons and sinews to allow for the energy to flow through your body better. And I know it works because there's this Master Zhou Gansheng, who is able to emit this qi at will, and he can change the voltage at will, and he gets feedback on that. He's done it on me a couple times, and I've seen him do it on several people. And I've even seen the school, Nei Gong Fu, give a test to several of its members, more senior members, as they go through their program. They did a test on the last time I was there in October in Italy for them to also emit the qi themselves with some assistance. And they were able to do that. So the things that Master Zhou can do, he can teach others. It's repeatable. It's something that's part of our human biology. They can emit it as well. And I'm positive it's also measurable. So it's just something that human beings can do with the right training.
What's kind of the typical reason someone engages in these practices for the long term, in addition to kind of some of the other benefits you talked about, longer life, etc.? Like, what's the aim? Is there some sort of enlightenment? Is it, this is a terrible way, but like the ability to experience precognition? Yeah. Like, what are sort of the goals of many of the practitioners?
Yes, I think that's going to be pretty much related to the practitioner you talk to. But in general, the three main themes that I have heard various people talk about when they are studying this, and I am interviewing people who are studying the Nei Gong and the Nei Dan, and I'm collecting more of those experiences. I'll have that available as a survey at some point as part of my dissertation. But mainly it's either for martial arts, to improve their martial arts. So that physical improvement and the abilities that go with that. It could be used for healing, not only healing for yourself, but also to heal others. Many of these masters who reach the level where they're able to do Fa Qi are healers. They have their own clinics or hospitals, and they combine, traditional Chinese medicine with this healing as an add-on, or spiritual development. So the spiritual development is going to be either Taoist related or Buddhist related. So depending on their tradition is what they're looking for. So, but ultimately, the long-term goal is to continue to advance as a human being towards that path of whatever that path is, enlightenment, no more reincarnation, becoming a conscious being outside of death, so you survive death. In Taoism, they talk about things like creating the embryo that this cultivation that you're doing with your Qi, you're actually creating a child, an infant within you. And that infant you'll transfer your consciousness to upon death. And then that will move on and live in the stars and things like that. So that's where it gets, esoteric and a lot more mythological. And I mean, as soon as I can find some people that have had those experiences and can interview them, I can let you know. But otherwise, it becomes a lot more theoretical at that stage. I can mainly talk about the things that I've witnessed myself or have seen in videos of people that I trust.
So you've been doing this for a little over 2 years.
Formally, yeah.
Formally.
I've been doing other practices for years before then that are somewhat related to this, but
like meditation, which
and yoga and other initiations and other practices,
What sort of kind of atypical, and when I say atypical, I don't mean atypical for people on this path. I mean like atypical for somebody who has never engaged in these practices. What sorts of experiences have you had that have been emergent from engaging in yoga, Qi Gong, Nei Gong, Nei Dan, all that stuff?
Yeah. Well, you start getting into those Psi abilities. That's one, right? For example, you've heard of the Psi games. Have you not?
Yeah. I don't know too much about it, but I'm aware of them.
Well, so the Psi games, it's actually a really cool idea. It's the first time ever, as far as I know, that there's going to be a series of games that are promoting Psi abilities in humans. It's going to be a fun, family-friendly kind of event. It's happening in August. And the gentleman who put this together, Hakeem, he's had a lot of experience. He's actually studies ninjutsu, where they promote these kind of Psi abilities as well as a natural progression of ninjutsu. And the idea is to allow people a safe space in which to express these things which are already natural as part of humans. So as I go through this journey, my Psi abilities have increased. And I decided, well, I want to be sure. I don't know if it's really good or not, if I'm fooling myself. So I will try out for the Psi games. So I went ahead and did some training. They gave us you sign up for it and they gave us an email. You've got 2 weeks in which to do your practices. And depending on how you rank, then you'll be invited to go to the games. So I've continued to do my practices, and I just decided to sign up for all 5 of the activities. And it turns out that I ranked in the top 10 in all 5. So I'm hoping to get an invite and be able to actually compete now in the games in August in all 5 categories.
What are the 5 categories?
I can tell you specifically, but off the top of my head, there's telekinesis, which is really micro PK. There's precognition, and which is, in the test it was, you've got 2 doors, and you're supposed to predict where this object appears behind the doors. Then there is dowsing, where you're trying to find an object. Then there is remote viewing, where you're supposed to, the way they did remote viewing was interesting. I'll mention that in a second. It was hard, but there's remote viewing, which is coming into vogue these days. And then there's mind sight. So mind sight is you place a blindfold over yourself, and then, on the screen will come like a color or a number or something like that, and you have to identify it. And the pre-testing was a color. So you had 3 colors to choose from, and you had to identify it. You had to do all of these tests. You had to do multiple rounds of them. So each test, like say precognition, you had to do the precognition, I think there's something like 20 times, and then you had to do 15 of those. So 15 times 20. And then that would give you a more reasonable score to know if you score consistently above chance. So if you're consistently above chance, then it's a better show, right? You invite people who are able to demonstrate the ability.
For the precognition, it was like you just had to pick which object was behind 2 doors, basically?
Yeah. Basically, 2 doors would show up, and there was an object, and you had to decide which door did it come out of. Right.
And you had to do that
like 20 times, and then you had to do that whole set of 20 times, 15 rounds.
Okay, so basically 300.
Yeah.
So the probability that you would successfully get all 300 of them right is 0.5 raised to the 300th power.
Yeah, and that's really hard, right? So they're looking
it's like, well, I'm not going to do the math because I can't do that math in my head, but it's probably something on the order of like the number of stars in the universe. Like it's something, maybe it's not that much, but it's something gigantic.
And I doubt they'll find.
I.e., it's one over that. It's zero. It's basically the probability that somebody could get all 300 right is not quite zero, but approaching zero.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're not looking for people to have perfection. They're just looking to see anything above chance. So if you chose the same door every single time, that's chance, right? Are you consistently scoring above that? If that's the case, then something's going on. Some information is being transferred. It's worth further study. And what's cool is in the side games, they have a whole bunch of scientists that are going to be there that have helped design the games and are actually going to be studying it. So it's not just for people to go and show off their abilities, but it's for study to help further our understanding collectively of what these psi abilities are.
And again, let's say you get the first 5 in a row right? The chance that you would get that just through sheer chance, the chance that would happen would be 1 in 32. Okay. But, so it's unlikely if you get the first 5 right. I'm just, just for the audience to understand how that compounds.
Yeah.
Right. And then the first 6 will be 1 over 64. The first 7 will be, 1 over 128, 1 over 256, 1 over 512, 1 over 1028, 24. Yeah. So you see how quickly it approaches zero.
Which makes it fascinating. And the fact that there are people who are scoring above chance, a random population, the people who, decided to be tested means something. It means that these abilities are probably more common. And then I'm looking to see if doing these Nei Dan practices and whatnot help increase that. So that's one thing, the psi abilities.
Can people still take this test?
No, well, at least if they follow what they initially listed as the rules, we only got 2 weeks to do it. Now, I'm a little hesitant because I've noticed in the rankings that not everybody followed directions. So I was one of the few people that actually did the minimum 15 rounds of everything. Some people only did 5 rounds, but they scored higher than I did. Does that mean they're still going to be invited to be in the games? Or should we only look at the people who actually did the 15 rounds for that? Because the idea is to find a consistent pool of applicants that are scoring above chance. You can't see that if somebody's only doing 5 instead of 15 rounds. So that's something that the games judges will have to figure out.
Okay, and then what was the psychokinesis?
Telekinesis, yeah. So it's micro PK because through the medium of the internet, they aren't able to measure macro PK, like having a rock, standing, barely on end, knocking it over, right? Instead, they basically created a square, which was a border, and then inside the square was a circle, and then there is a yellow dot. The yellow dot moves randomly, and the idea was that through your intention, you're trying to keep the yellow dot somewhere in the center of the square. If it touches the edge of the square 100 times, then your round's over. So the longer you can keep it away from the edges, the better. Now, that yellow dot was a bear, because sometimes that yellow dot would shoot right towards the edge, and within 7 seconds, it would have hit 100 times the edge. So you really had to, I tried 2 different techniques of trying to get that yellow dot to stay in the center. One technique I tried was to use emotion and pretend the yellow dot was a puppy. And so I've got my hands around the center and I'm like, come on, puppy, come on, go in the center. I've got food for you. I got your favorite toy. Come on. And I found that if I was more energetic and injecting this kind of emotion, that I was actually able to keep it in the center longer.
I've heard that psychokinesis tends to work.
Yeah.
In fact, and I don't want to propagate this because, it's just one person that I talk to, but rage would fuel it.
Any kind of emotion, right? Because you're trying to have a focus, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, which I'd like to ask the designers, when the web page gets presented and the test starts, is the random number generation happening as a program on the browser that is on my computer? Therefore, the target is closer to me, and therefore my PK, my concentration, is affecting something that is close to me. Or is it something that's happening on a remote computer towards wherever they are, where they're presenting the test, and therefore your PK has to travel all that distance? Because it is known through other testing that PK drops significantly with distance. The closer you are to the target, the more effect you have on it. So I've been lucky enough to have...
Yeah, that sounds less like PK and more like, I don't know. I guess you are, but you're affecting a random number generator. You're not really...
Yeah, you're affecting a small amount of change on something rather than...
Like you're not really moving a physical object. You're manipulating the quantum state of electrons, basically. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I've been consulting with Trevor Seven. If you haven't heard from him, he is the YouTuber with the longest running telekinesis channel. His channel's been around for over 14 years, and he is a macro PK individual. He can move things like feathers and rocks and toy cars and things like that. His channel is fantastic, and he actually teaches people how to do this. I'm actually writing a paper on him for American Academy of Religion, due out in June. But his methods are interesting, but that's for macro PK. So I tried to use some of his methods for the micro PK, and it seemed to kind of work because I scored in the top 10. So I'm interested to see what the actual test will be when we're in the games.
What was the second technique you used? You said the first one was to do the puppy emotion.
Yeah. The second was, instead of using the bubbly emotion and treating it as an object and trying to encourage it to stay in the center, I instead used more, I guess, of what you said in terms of rage, where I blanked out the red square and put my hands in the center, and I simply focused and tried to make it like pinpointed, locked in that center. And if it drifted, the ball drifted, I would try to send chi out through my hand to move the ball. And I could see it bouncing off of where I was pushing the chi off of. Sometimes it would seem like it would move away once I pushed the chi in. It was pretty exhausting. I was sending chi out through my hands and pinpointing with my focus somewhere in the center where it would stay at. So we'll see which method works.
Oh, you don't know which one worked better?
They both seem to work. They seem to allow me to get a little more than 40 seconds in the center. But the second method was more exhausting.
Yeah. Rage tends to do that.
Yeah. There's much more focus, much more sending out the energy as opposed to just
push and pull. Push and pull.
Kind
of. Yeah. The other one is just like you're losing energy. You're expending energy. The other one is you're just kind of using its own energy against it, I guess. Or
possibly. Yeah, we'll see. So that's one thing. So one of the things that I would say doing this Nei Dan process is it seems that your psi abilities go up. The other thing I should say is, so one of the outcomes, not necessarily the goal from these three groups that I'm studying, but one of the natural outcomes of this alchemy process is that the energy flows through your body better, and you're able to do this fa chi, expend energy outside of your body, this electricity. So the question is, I've been doing this for a while, do I feel electricity? Well, it takes years for you to be able to develop the ability to be able to open your channels, to be able to move the energy, and then to be able to get that energy outside of your body. And it takes adjustments. You have to get adjustments by the masters. They need to push energy into your body to clear your channels. There actually are things, herbs that you can take that will help boost your chi. There's supposedly like a field that the masters will generate, which allow you to express the chi. The whole point, as I'm saying, is that you may get to the point where you can move the chi outside of your body with assistance, but then the next stage that may take years more training is before you're able to move the energy outside your body without assistance. So right now, all I can say is that as a practitioner, I'm at the stage where I can feel the energy collecting. I can feel the energy transforming. I can feel it moving in my body. And doing certain standing exercises, I actually feel threads of electricity moving along my arm, inside my arm, along my hand, and pushing out I feel pressure from the inside coming out of my fingertips. So I do feel very fine threads of electricity in my body as I do the exercises. So it seems to be working. I'm going on a trip to Malaysia in July where I'm meeting some more masters. They're going to be pushing energy into my channels. And I'm hoping at that stage, because I'm working my butt off to try to do well, this is kind of like a martial art test for me. I'm trying to do as many reps and be as fit as possible for this, so that once they test me and see whether or not my channels are open, I hope that they find that they're open. And I would like to try to push energy out for them to gauge how far along I am, because I feel like I'm close after doing, the amount of time I put into it. So that's something that a beginner will not experience. They may not experience these psi abilities increasing, and they're definitely not going to experience the electricity in their body. It just simply takes time for them to be able to do it. But if they put in the time and do the right conditions under the right instruction, I think they can do it. I think it's part of the inheritance of our humanity.
Now, when you're kind of doing these experiences, is there an increased probability of like interaction with Actually, let's save that for the next episode.
Okay.
My next question though was, what about like the dietary? Are there any dietary requirements?
Yes.
Or it might not even be requirements, but this is probably the part that would make it probably impossible for me, because I am very carnivore-like. And then physical, like exercises and things that you typically do or should do to make yourself more fit for this process.
Yeah. So this is Taoism. The body is very much a factor. You cannot perform these things without the body. It is rooted in the world. So you can't eat crap, basically. You can't be a couch potato. You have to, the very first thing all my teachers say is that you have to have a fit body. You have to have a healthy body. That has to happen before you start these practices, really. So as you do the practices, it'll actually nudge you towards that. But the idea is that your internal organs need to be very healthy. So one of the first things, like Rudy from Nei Gong, one of the first things he teaches the students is to go on a special diet, which is kind of like the diet diabetics would use, to have easily digestible, clean food for several months, so that when you start reintroducing other foods, you are better able to gauge which foods work well for your body or not. Under these practices, you're doing the practices, but you're trying to have a very plain, easily digestible, not high sugar-based, processed food-based diet. So you need to eat cleanly, essentially. What's interesting is, going through this now for a couple of years, I can tell if a food is not going to be good for me pretty instantly, in that the thought that comes to me when I consume the food is whether or not this food has Qi or doesn't have Qi. And there's quite a lot of food, unfortunately, in the American diet which does not have Qi. It's just dead food, and it's not going to do work for you. But we don't know that. If we keep eating that same food over and over again, you won't know. Just like if you're a smoker, you don't know how bad the smoke smells until you've stopped, right, for a while. And then you become much more sensitive to what that's doing. But the same thing for your foods. So as you eat more cleanly, more used to that, when you start introducing other foods, like I did a cheat yesterday where I was given a free brownie by this place that had sort of messed up my order. And so they gave me a free brownie. And I'm like, it's been a long time since I've had a brownie. Maybe I'll just eat it and see what happens. Well, turns out I woke up a little bit with a headache and it tasted extremely chemically. And I knew it was not good for me. So it can definitely affect you, and if it's going to work well in your system or not. But if it was good chocolate, good clean chocolate, and probably in my case, if it didn't have a lot of dairy in it, it probably would have been okay. But that's one thing too. And as part of my process, I've learned that I need to avoid dairy. Is
it different for different people? So dairy might be good for some people and bad for others, or?
There may be a slight range, but it still follows the same traditional Chinese medicine kind of ideas of, if something is too much yang or too little yin, or if it's damp or things like that. So dairy gives dampness, is their term for it. So when I have cheese or cow milk or whatever, pretty quickly it creates phlegm. So immediately I get phlegm in my throat and I get phlegm kind of a little bit building up in my sinuses. So that's just a sign for me that I should not eat dairy right now. Maybe later, after my system goes through the transformation, it might be okay. But I know during this training period, dairy is not a thing I should be eating because my body's reacting against it. But certain fruits and stuff like that, fruits are awesome. Fruits give me energy and they have chi in it, and they feel fine.
So, not to make this about me, but for someone like me, I'm like super bland. Like,
yeah,
my diet's horrific, but it's horrific in the sense that it's focused on this bland. So, like, if you told me I had to cut out all sugars and stuff like that, I could do it. It wouldn't be an issue. I mean, it'd be a little annoying, but that wouldn't be the problem. But if you told me that I had to eat vegetables, I'm done. Like, I'd rather charge a guy who's like a gunman in my house. I'd be less fearful to do that than to eat a plate of vegetables. But if you told me like I could eat eggs and rice every day, I'd be like, I could do that.
Yeah,
so
those are good.
With this kind of range, like, where would someone like me, if I wanted to engage in this practice and I have this bland kind of preference and vegetable phobia, like, what sorts of foods could I eat and still be okay?
Yeah, so that's going to be individualized, right? The overall idea is, first, how far do you want to go in the training, right? It's perfectly fine just to want to be fit and just to restore the base level of Jing that you have and have enough energy to have a good life. You don't have to get that extra energy to be able to express it, to heal other people, or even have that extra energy to reach enlightenment. You can just have a great life that's healthy and is a long human life of, 90 years or whatever, or longer. So that would be something you would work with the teacher in, and you would listen to your body as you do the exercises, because the exercises make you much more sensitive to what's going on inside. And as you consume things, you'll be able to tell if they're positive for your body at that stage or not for your body at that stage. There's a list of suggestions when you go through the authentic Nei Gong system, but it really is, hey, you have to tune it for yourself. But it's pretty clear that if you eat things that are really fatty, it's probably going to weigh down your system more than if you eat something that's less fatty, or something that's more oily than something that's less oily, or something that has a lot of chemicals in it versus something that doesn't. So if that range kind of helps get where you're at, then that's where you're at, right? That's where you're going to make the progress. I think progress can be made up to a certain point, with some variability, for sure.
What about fasting? Actually, fasting, it's easier for me to go for 5 days without food than it is for me to eat one vegetable. But I'm just like, I'd be like, I'll just not eat for 5 days. Thanks. Right.
So
what about,
So this concept of taking things from your environment, the chi of that, in order to convert it and use it in your body requires chi. So it's going to require you to consume something, whether it's just liquids. You can get chi from breathing, from the air, but eventually, you're going to reach an energy deficit and it's going to start to negatively affect you, right? So fasting is something that can be done while doing the training, but usually most of the teachers sort of frown upon doing it for a long period of time. It's just something that you would do in order to like kickstart your weight loss program or something, or once a month, maybe you fast for a day or two or something like that. And then, and if you are doing extended fasts, probably not do the exercises that day. Don't do your Nei Dan exercises because it'll be draining on you.
Oh, believe me. Like, I've done it once where I just didn't eat for 5 days. The first 3 days are excruciating because your ghrelin is like raging. You're super hungry. But by day 4, it's like, I'm not hungry at all. Right. Like but you immediately go into this like low energy state. Like you just don't have energy to do anything. You're not hungry anymore. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Now, I should mention that the awareness of your own personal energy is important when doing this, because it is possible to overtax yourself. Like if you get to the upper levels and you're starting to be able to do Fachi, it is possible to overtax yourself. And unfortunately, there have been people who have died because they have extended when you send energy out of your body, that's your life force. You're actually sending your energy. Now, if you've collected properly and you have the Jing and you're collecting the extra and you only use the extra to give to other people for healing, you'll be fine. But if you exhaust your extra and you start digging into your base energy, well, you're starting to slowly kill yourself. You're starting to expend the energy you need for your own life. So there has unfortunately been a master who several years ago was doing something heroic, had been healing other patients, and then somebody came in and was trying to heal them, and they began to die. And then he extended his energy even more to try to stop them from dying. But that was too much on his system, and he ended up having a heart attack and he died. So we lost a master because he gave his all to somebody else to try to stop them from dying. So it is serious. It's not just a theoretical model of energy. It is something that is actually part of your life force that you're collecting and gathering and then you're using.
All right. Any final words for the audience?
No, I think as an academic, this is a great subject. I encourage my fellow academics to look into this. This is not just woo-woo mysticism. This is something that is actually being practiced more and more in the West. And I want other academics to join me in studying these groups from multiple angles so that we can actually learn more together about this kind of movement as it moves from the East to the West.
All right, Jeff. It was an absolute pleasure and look forward to speaking with you in the next episode.
Yeah, thank you, Sean.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you could get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much and keep watching. I really appreciate it.